those of the elderly and shut-ins. The Prime Minister also visited sites for achievable housing solutions to be constructed in an area of Tivoli Gardens and Denham Town known as Rasta City. Residents of Rasta City, West Kingston, are hopeful about the possible development of a new housing solution in the community. Rasta City consists of an apartment building that was constructed over 50 years ago but has since deteriorated, resulting in poor living conditions for residents. On Saturday, while interacting with the residents, Prime Minister Andrew Holness expressed that while other constituencies suffer from similar situations, those in Rasta City require urgent attention.
I've also seen where the housing projects which were started in the 70s and 80s, many of them remain incomplete, and residents who were located in areas with the expectation that the housing solutions would be completed so that they could take them up, they still remain in those temporary structures in those areas, and the government has to complete those programs which were started.
The Prime Minister assured residents that plans are underway to ease their plight.
I know that the NHT started plans. They have them on their books. I think they have almost completed designs. The issue now is to actually start work on it. You have been very patient. You have been very loyal people.
Prime Minister Holness also mentioned the connection between the poor housing conditions and the crime situation that exists in West Kingston.
There is a strong connection between your housing conditions, your everyday living, and the crime situation. I'm happy to say that the crime situation in this constituency, and in particularly in this community in Denham Town, has improved. That since the zones of special operations and certain other interventions, that murders in particular have gone down.
However, he says poor housing conditions and difficult economic circumstances faced by the residents are no excuse for living bad. And as part of the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, colleges and universities have narrowed the conversation to tackle the marked increase in sexual harassment and assault cases on campus. Representatives from a number of colleges took part in a press conference at UWI to discuss potential solutions. Christine Forbes has more.
World-class education, not trauma. University students are calling for the immediate implementation of a sexual harassment bill to create safer learning environments. A student representative shares her story, having experienced sexual assault on UWI campus by someone she says had no business on campus. She says far more must be done to spare students from the traumatic effects of sexual harassment and sexual assault.
Do not pretend that these things do not happen. I am sitting right here and it happened to me. I am failed policy, lazy documents, inaccessible aid. I am all protocols observed. I am the noise that came before the not asking for a campaign. And while I was able to return to complete my studies, this is not a shared collective reality. The reactive nature that has been taken on this issue needs to be addressed with immediate, proactive implementations.
Adding to the conversation is Guild President of UWI, Christina Williams, who criticizes what she calls a lack of effort from governing bodies.
So currently we have no national legislation that speaks specifically to tertiary institutions. That is a major shortfall on the part of the Tertiary Education Commission, and I will say that here frankly. In fact, the Jamaican Union of Tertiaries have taken it upon themselves, JUTs, to draft their own guideline, and we'll be sending it to Parliament because we just won't wait any further on the part of agencies that are supposed to do that.
Christine Forbes reporting for CVM Live.
The objective of the Ministry of Education is to ensure that every child and student has an equal opportunity. The words from Minister with responsibility for education, Carl Samuda. According to him, if this objective is supported by the administration, then the ministry will succeed.
The Minister with responsibility for education, youth and information, Carl Samuda, is encouraging staff at the ministry to remain committed to its goal.
I ask of you No matter how hard you think you might have worked, no matter how much effort you think you might have put into your job, no matter how much commitment you have not only put in but displayed, every day you continue to display that commitment. Redouble that effort in the interest of making everything you do be done quicker.
Samuda goes further to note that any delays on the part of the administration at the ministry will have an impact on the delivery of education. According to him, once educational institutions request resources for a particular time, the onus is on the ministry to provide this immediately.
Many times, since I've been here, I hear this constant refrain. Boy, they ask you to write, put it in writing. And that is the most feared expression. Put it in writing. Drop me an email. Send me a note. That's like going to an undertaker.
The minister with responsibility for education is appealing to staff at the ministry to work on improving their response time in meeting the demands of educators and students. Over 400 staff members from the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information were honored at the event.
Don't always go in search of the big things. Let's do the small and modest things efficiently. And the big things will take care of themselves.
Khadija Thomas, CVM Live.
Managing waste to preserve our future. That's the theme under which Executive Director of the National Solid Waste Management, NSWMA, used to address a ceremony structured around the general conservation of the environment. Here's Christine Forbes with this report.
The National Solid Waste Management Authority says more trucks are needed in order for them to function effectively with the collection and disposal of garbage across the country. The statement was made during a presentation by the Executive Director of NSWMA, Audley Garden, at a conservation and greening TVET sensitization seminar.
To do the job properly, we need probably about 150 reliable trucks. Of the 120 trucks that we currently use, we could say about a half of them is reliable trucks. Some are very old. You see them for yourself. And they're really old, and some of them even leak out things on the road and they smell and all them something. But we meander along with them because that's what we have.
There are 8 disposal sites across the country, some of which have people living in close proximity, as they use the dumps as a source of income. Garden says the NSWMA made several attempts to remove such persons, but they were not able to do so. He says there is much more work to be done after the garbage is collected.
So we have quite a bit of work that has to be done to manage the garbage once we take it from you. And spreading and compacting require heavy-duty equipment. So, for example, at the Riverton, we have 3 pieces of heavy-duty equipment on work daily there, and they're very costly. So it's a very costly operation to manage the garbage.
He says the NSWMA is also conducting public education sessions where Jamaicans are being taught how to properly dispose of garbage to achieve a sustainable environment. Christine Forbes, CVM Live.
The Guild of Students at the University of the West Indies, MONA, recently hosted a climate action conference to bring awareness to the facts of climate change and what steps can be taken to reduce extremity of the effects. Here's Christine Forbes once more.
Life and death. That's how Colonel Charles Jr. describes the reality of the effects of climate change. He says that the effects are not limited to any one aspect of life.
It threatens water security, it threatens food security, it threatens our health. And what we saw last year was perhaps the most prolonged ongoing drought that we've seen in decades. That wasn't because of anything else other than the impact of climate change.
Also present at the Climate Action Conference was Raymond Price, who lauded the UWI Guild for taking the initiative to bring awareness to students, as it is a step in the right direction.
The problem with the awareness, though, is that sometimes it can lead to individuals feeling overwhelmed. We have heard from previous presenters the impact that climate change has had. It's nothing that started 50 years ago, by the way, because if you look on the climate change situation we face in Jamaica, the genesis of it was in our slavery past, when coastal forests were destroyed to create flat plains to grow sugarcane.
Charles Jr., who is also the chairperson for the United Nations Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, Youth Advisory, says that the conversation needs to move beyond the theory and to more proactive actions from Jamaicans.
I want to challenge the Guild to come up with the kinds of practical and relevant activities that are going to show that you're not just talking about it, but you're putting in place sustainable ways to contribute positively to the development of this nation's capacity to withstand the impacts of climate change.
Christine Forbes, CVM Live.
Thanks, Christine. Time for a quick break here on CVM Live. When we return, we'll have the news from overseas.